Welcome to the Feminist Park podcast. I'm Kwame.
And I'm Leilani. It's great to be kicking off this journey with you all today.
Yeah, we're diving into work that's really closely tied to the vision behind the Feminist Park project.
Imagining these truly equitable public spaces, starting with the idea for an intersectional feminist park right here in Berlin.
Exactly. And this podcast, well, it's kind of an extension of that. We're going to be digging into the academic research that, supports and informs that kind of vision.
We'll be taking these dense, sometimes quite academic papers and really pulling out the core and insights.
And looking at them through specific lenses, things like environmental justice, intersectionality, anti-colonial thought, queer theory.
All the stuff that helps us think critically about space.
I want you to start by taking a second and just visualizing your absolute favorite local park.
Oh, that's a good mental exercise.
Right, just really picture it in your mind right now. Build the architecture of it in your head.
Yeah, maybe it is this sprawling, lush green field where people are throwing frisbees or having picnics.
Exactly. Or maybe it's a quiet, paved plaza, shaded by a few massive ancient trees where you like to sit and read on a Sunday afternoon.
You definitely know the space. You know how the air feels a little cooler there?
Yeah, it feels relaxing. It feels like a sanctuary, a place where you inherently belong.
That feeling of belonging is so crucial.
It really is. But now I want you to take that exact same mental image, that exact same physical space, and change the parameters of how you are moving through it.
Change them how exactly?
Well, imagine navigating those exact same paths, but you are pushing a heavy double stroller and wrangling a toddler.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the whole terrain changes.
Completely. Or imagine walking through that park and you do not speak the local language.
Right, so all the informational signs, the rules, the historical plaques, they're completely incomprehensible to you.
Precisely. Or, perhaps most profoundly, imagine trying to enjoy that serene space while carrying a constant low-level worry about your physical safety.
Just simply because of who you are, what you look like, or where you come from.
Exactly. Suddenly that relaxing green oasis doesn't feel so welcoming.
Not at all.
I mean, the trees haven't moved, right? The benches are in the exact same spot, but the space itself has fundamentally shifted.
It completely changes the topography of the space. The physical layout, the concrete, and the dirt, it all remains exactly the same.
Right.
But the lived experience of that environment is radically altered based on the identity of the person walking through it.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it.
We tend to view a park as a static object, but it is actually a highly dynamic social environment.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the prevailing wisdom, the cultural narrative we're all fed, is that nature, and by extension public parks, are the great equalizers of city life.
That's the myth we all buy into, isn't it?
It totally is. We look at a park and think, well, it's just trees and grass. It's free.
There's no admission ticket, so it must be for everyone.
Right. But what if that is a complete myth? What if the very way we design, build, and maintain our public green spaces is quietly and honestly efficiently pushing certain people out?
And that question right there is the core mission of our deep dive today. We are going to rigorously challenge the assumption that public green spaces are inherently neutral or equally accessible to all residents.
Which is a huge topic.
It is massive.
Yeah.
And to do that, we are looking at a deeply revealing 2026 academic paper published in the journal Urban Forestry and Urban Greening.
Okay, what's it called?
It is titled Urban and Peri-Urban Green Space Use in Two Racialized Neighborhoods of Barcelona, Spain. The research was conducted by Alex Lazwicki, Steve Corbera, and Isabel Angelowski.
Awesome. And before we get into the findings of this paper, which honestly completely reframed how I look at city planning, we really need to establish some parameters for how we are going to discuss this material.
Yes, that is a vital point to make right at the outset.
Because we are dealing with structural inequality and lived experiences of marginalization today.
Exactly. This deep dive explores highly sensitive socio-political realities. The source material we are drawing from contains documented, first-hand accounts of interpersonal racism, systemic exclusion, and deep social divides.
So we need to be clear about our angle here.
I want to be entirely clear with you, the listener. Our role today is not to endorse a specific political platform or take partisan sides.
Right. We aren't here to push an agenda.
We are acting as an impartial lens, focusing purely on reporting the specific findings, the data points, and the lived experiences documented by the researchers in their 2026 study.
We are here to explore the profound ideas contained in their research and just try to understand the realities they uncovered.
Nothing more, nothing less.
I'm glad we laid that out because the goal here is ultimately constructive. We are taking these incredibly dense academic findings from Barcelona and figuring out how to apply them to a really powerful, tangible concept.
The idea of the feminist park.
Yes, the feminist park. We want to understand how urban planners and communities can design a space not just for aesthetics or, bumping up property values, but for actual measurable liberation.
It's a fascinating concept.
It really is. So, to start that journey, we have to travel to Barcelona.
But not the touristy Barcelona you're probably thinking of.
Definitely not. We aren't talking about the Gothic Quarter or hanging out by the beaches. We are looking at two very specific, contiguous neighborhoods in the northern periphery of the city.
Ciutat Meridiana, which we will refer to as CM,
And Torre Baró, which we'll call TB.
painting an accurate picture of the geography of CM and TB is absolutely essential to understand the researchers' findings.
Yeah, lay it out for us. What do these places actually look like?
Well, these are neighborhoods defined by geographic and social isolation. According to the study, they are essentially boxed in by the urban infrastructure itself.
Like physically trapped.
Yes. On one side, they are entirely severed from the rest of the Barcelona metropolis by massive multi-lane highways, specifically the C58 and C33.
So you cannot just casually stroll from these neighborhoods into the city center to grab a coffee.
No, absolutely not. It's a massive barrier. But on the other side, they border something quite spectacular.
Right, the forest.
Exactly. An absolutely massive natural protected area called the Collserola Forest.
I was actually looking up the scale of that forest while prepping for this, and it is staggering. Collserola is over 8,000 hectares.
It's the largest protected green area in the entire Barcelona metropolitan region.
So you have this incredibly stark juxtaposition. You have these highly urbanized, concrete, dense, somewhat cut-off neighborhoods pressed right up against the edge of a vast, wild wilderness.
It sounds almost cinematic, doesn't it?
It really does. But the socioeconomic reality of the people living on that border is very harsh. CM and TB are the two poorest neighborhoods in Barcelona.
The income disparity is severe. The researchers point out that the average per capita income in these neighborhoods is drastically lower than the citywide average.
How much lower are we talking?
We are looking at residents surviving on less than 10,000 euros a year, compared to the city average, which is over 18,000 euros.
Wow. That is almost half.
And they are physically miles away from the wealthiest districts of Barcelona, creating a profound spatial segregation.
That physical distance reinforces the economic distance.
Exactly. And alongside this economic reality, CM and TB have a highly diverse demographic makeup, with a very significant proportion of residents having been born outside of Spain.
Which leads us right into the central argument of the paper. Cities all over the world right now are pouring money into green infrastructure.
Absolutely, it's a major trend.
They are planting millions of trees, building eco-parks, designing climate shelters, all to fight the very real threat of climate change.
But the researchers argue that the historical and contemporary planning of these green spaces often completely invisibilizes or privileges certain social and cultural identities.
So the interventions meant to save the city can actually deepen the inequalities within it.
Precisely. It is a critical flaw in modern urban planning.
How so?
Well, if planners approach a new park as a purely ecological project, just measuring carbon capture and biodiversity, they completely ignore the social ecosystem.
Right. They treat the park like a science experiment instead of a human gathering place.
And when you don't intentionally design a space to be inclusive, you inevitably design it for the dominant culture by default.
I want to stop right there and look at how they actually prove this, because I hit a huge methodological question early in the reading.
Let's hear it.
If you want to study racial inequality in urban planning, you need data on race.
Makes sense.
You need to know how different racial groups interact with the space. But Spain doesn't collect census data on race or ethnicity.
That's right.
So how do you scientifically study racial inequality in a country that legally operates with a colorblind census?
It's a profound methodological hurdle, and it requires a very nuanced approach from the researchers.
So what do?
Because the Spanish government does not provide census data categorized by race, the research team used the respondent's country of birth as a proxy for racialization.
Okay, so birth country as a stand-in for race.
Correct. They surveyed 230 adults across CM and TB and categorized their responses into two broad groups.
Let me guess. Global South and Global North.
Exactly.
Yeah.
those born in the global south and those born in the global north.
And in the context of this specific study, Global North primarily referred to people born in Spain or other European countries, right?
Yes, exactly. While the global south category encompassed residents hailing from Central and South America, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South Asia.
I mean, I know using geopolitics as a stand-in for race isn't a perfect one-to-one translation, though. There has to be some margin of error there.
The authors are very transparent about that limitation. Using birth country as a proxy is not perfect because racialization is highly complex.
Yeah.
However, they justify this approach by noting that in the European context, nationality and birthplace are incredibly strong indicators of how a person is racialized by the dominant society.
Ah, okay. That makes a lot of sense.
In Spain, being an immigrant from the global south is heavily intertwined with the daily structural experience of racism and marginalization.
What I found brilliant about their methodology, though, was the choice of the neighborhoods themselves.
It really was a smart design choice.
Yeah. By deliberately choosing to conduct this survey in CM and TB, the two poorest neighborhoods in the entire city, they effectively neutralize class as a confounding variable.
That is the genius of this study design right there.
Right, because if they surveyed a wealthy neighborhood and a poor neighborhood, any differences in park usage could easily be written off as just an income issue.
Like, oh, they don't go to the park because they're working two jobs.
Exactly. But in CM and TB, the residents, regardless of whether they were born in the global north or the global south, are all living in similarly precarious economic conditions.
This leveling of the economic playing field allows the researchers to really isolate their variables.
So they can look purely at the intersection of race, gender, and age to see who is actually accessing these public goods.
Because usually, the conversation around who gets the nice parks stops at money. We talk about how rich areas have beautiful tree canopies and poor areas have concrete.
And that naturally brings up the concept of green gentrification, which the paper spends time defining.
It's a crucial term to understand.
I am a big fan of analogies to make sense of academic terms. When I was reading their definition of green gentrification, the image that came to mind was a landlord.
Okay, walk me through that.
Imagine a landlord renovating a rundown apartment building, supposedly to make it nicer for the current tenants.
A noble goal on the surface.
Right. But the sheer cost of that renovation, the fancy new countertops and the fresh paint, is exactly what drives the rent up and gets those original tenants evicted.
The improvement itself is the weapon of displacement.
Exactly. The renovation is what kicks them out.
That is a hauntingly accurate way to visualize it. The researchers define green gentrification as a process driven by land speculation, where the exploitation of a green gap leads directly to the displacement of working class and racialized residents.
So a city government might come into a historically underfunded neighborhood with noble intentions?
They want to preserve local biodiversity, mitigate urban heat islands, and improve public health outcomes. So they build a stunning multi-million-euro eco-park.
And then the market reacts.
Instantly. Property values adjacent to the new park skyrocket. Rents go up.
And the tragic irony is that the very people who endured decades of living with concrete, industrial pollution, and neglect are economically forced out the moment the neighborhood finally becomes green and livable.
They get pushed further out into the periphery to even more affordable, less green neighborhoods.
And the cycle just starts all over again.
Which creates a systemic phenomenon the authors refer to as the nature gap.
The nature gap.
Yes. Working class and racialized communities are kept in a state of perpetual geographic precarity, constantly chased away from the health and psychological benefits of nature.
This dynamic proves that creating a park is never just an ecological act. Planting a tree in a city is a deeply economic and political act.
It's never neutral.
So if we accept that premise that parks are political, then if we want to talk about how to design a truly liberating space, this ultimate goal of the feminist park.
We can't just debate whether to plant oak trees or maple trees.
Exactly. We have to look at the human data. We have to look at exactly who is using the current spaces, and more importantly, how the design of those spaces is subtly or not so subtly keeping certain people out.
To do that effectively, we need to break down the researchers' findings through several different intersectional lenses.
Okay, let's do it. Where should we start?
Let's start by looking at the data through a combined class, socioeconomic, and ableism, or disability justice perspective.
I think to really grasp this perspective, you have to understand the physical reality of walking out your front door in CM and TB.
Right, setting the scene is important.
Because when I imagine a neighborhood park, I envision flat, rolling lawns, easy to walk across. but the topography of these specific neighborhoods is intensely vertical.
They're built on very steep slopes.
The streets are irregular and winding. To get to the grocery store or the bus stop, residents are constantly navigating massive sets of concrete stairs and public escalators.
It is
A park with no green cover? That's bleak. The paper noted something about the trees there that really frustrated me, actually.
about how they're sectioned off.
Yes, there are some trees in this park, but they are enclosed in these corner plots, completely cut off by barriers without any accessible paths leading to them.
So you can see them, but you can't actually use them for shade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the public plazas, the actual squares where human beings gather and sit, lack trees entirely. You have a park where the trees are essentially treated as museum exhibits behind a fence, rather than functional shade providers for the community.
What's fascinating here is how the aesthetic choices of urban planners directly translate into physical accessibility barriers.
It becomes a profound ableism issue.
CM and TB, with all their concrete and lack of canopy, suffer immensely during summer heat waves. They become urban heat islands.
Yet their designated green spaces offer almost zero shade.
Right. And if a park has no shade and the paths to the few trees that do exist are inaccessible, it severely limits who can safely exist in that space.
It creates a hostile environment for anyone with mobility issues, for pregnant individuals, and particularly for the elderly.
And the survey data backs that up completely. When the researchers looked at who was visiting the massive Calcerola forest right next door, which remember is incredibly rugged and steep, the age disparity was huge.
Oh, I bet.
Older residents, those aged 60 and above, were far less likely to visit the protected area compared to younger groups.
What were the numbers on that?
The numbers showed only 44% of residents over 60 had visited the forest, whereas visitation rates for younger demographic groups ranged anywhere from 55 to 70%.
If we look at the mechanics of why that happens, it makes perfect sense.
Simple physical reality.
Right. If you are 70 years old, perhaps relying on a cane or a walker, and it is a 95-degree summer day, you physically cannot navigate a steep, uneven dirt trail that offers no shade canopy and no benches to rest on.
Your absence from the park isn't a lack of desire to be in nature.
No. It is a direct result of the environment being structurally hostile to your physical presence.
The lack of inclusive design is literally a wall keeping them out.
But as the paper shifts into a migrant and racial justice perspective, the nature of these walls changes.
They become less about physical concrete and more about invisible cultural barriers that the dominant culture might not even notice.
Let's examine the differing usage patterns between the local, concrete-heavy urban parks inside the neighborhoods versus the vast, wild Calcerola forest on the border.
The survey revealed a massive disparity in how different groups use the local neighborhood urban spaces.
What did they find?
95% of the respondents from the Global South reported visiting these urban green spaces, compared to 84% of respondents from the Global North.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I had to read that statistic twice.
Because it seems counterintuitive.
Because we just established that these local parks are kind of brutal. They are hot concrete plazas with fenced-off trees. Why would the usage rate be so staggeringly high for Global South residents in a suboptimal space?
The researchers point to structural and economic realities to explain this high usage.
Okay, lay it out.
Residents from the Global South in CM and TB frequently live in substandard, highly congested housing situations.
Like overcrowded apartments.
Yes. When your apartment is incredibly small, perhaps housing extended family, and crucially, lacking proper ventilation or air conditioning during a heat wave, staying indoors becomes unbearable.
If not outright dangerous.
Exactly. In that context, the public plaza ceases to be a place for casual recreation. It becomes an essential, life-saving extension of your living room.
Wow. So they aren't going to the plaza because it's a beautiful, relaxing oasis?
No, not at all.
They are going because they don't have a private backyard, they don't have AC, and the public square is literally their only option for outdoor relief and breathable air. It's a survival mechanism.
Furthermore, the study notes a distinct difference in the types of activities performed in these spaces.
What kind of activities?
Global South residents reported engaging in much more collective, family-oriented activities in these plazas.
Meaning they are going in groups?
Yes, they're utilizing the space to socialize with neighbors, to supervise children playing together, to build and maintain community bonds.
And what about the Global North residents?
In contrast, respondents from the Global North reported higher rates of individualistic activities, particularly in the nearby forest, such as jogging alone or walking a dog.
So you have the Global South residents, highly visible in these local neighborhood plazas. They are actively claiming the space for community survival.
But that claiming of space creates friction.
And this is the part of the paper that documents some truly difficult, visceral realities about microsegregation and racism in public areas.
The qualitative data the researchers captured illustrates this friction incredibly vividly.
Yeah, the open-ended survey answers were tough to read.
In the open-ended portions of the survey, several Maghrebi women shared their experiences of trying to use the neighborhood pétanque courts.
Just for context, pétanque is a very traditional, often male-dominated European lawn game, similar to bosh.
Right. So these women, who the researchers noted spoke and understood Spanish perfectly well, simply wanted to use the open courts as a safe, flat surface for their children to play on.
Just a flat piece of dirt for their kids.
Exactly. But when they entered that specific space, they faced direct, derogatory comments from white men who were already there.
The quote the paper included really stuck with me.
It's very harsh.
One of the women recalled the men saying loudly, "They do not even know how to speak Spanish."
It is such an insidious, targeted remark.
It really is. They are in a public park. The courts are built with public funds. But those men were acting as self-appointed gatekeepers.
They weaponized language and racist assumptions to draw a line in the dirt.
It's a way of looking at a mother and child and saying, "You do not belong here. This amenity is our territory."
If we connect this specific incident to the bigger picture, this is precisely how dominant white European norms are enforced in public spaces without any official laws being passed.
It's all unwritten rules.
Exactly. The researchers argue that these everyday, repetitive experiences of microsegregation translate into a deep psychological sense that these spaces do not actually belong to racialized groups.
The park might be legally open to the public, the gates might be unlocked, but culturally and socially, invisible walls have been erected.
It makes residents feel entirely out of place in the center of their own neighborhood.
It shatters the myth of the neutral park. The grass isn't just grass, it's contested territory, heavily policed by social norms and prejudice.
And when we take this analysis a step further and apply a feminist and gender perspective, the height of those invisible walls becomes even more pronounced.
This brings us to the boundary line between the city and the wild.
Yes. If we shift our focus from the concrete neighborhood plazas to the 8,000-hectare expanse of the Colserola forest, the gender divide regarding who actually crosses that boundary is one of the most striking findings in the entire paper.
I have the numbers right here, and the drop-off is severe.
Give us the breakdown.
According to the study, women from the global north visit the Colserola forest at a fairly high rate. 66.2% of them reported going there.
Okay, nearly two-thirds.
Right. But when you look at women from the global south, only 45.5% report visiting the forest.
That is a chasm.
It's a massive gap, and it is vital to point out that this isn't an information gap. The researchers specifically tested for awareness.
And what did they find?
They found that knowledge of the forest's existence was universally high across all demographics. Everyone knows the massive forest is right there. The global south women are actively making the choice not to enter it.
To understand that choice, we have to look at the drivers of exclusion. When the survey asked residents why they didn't visit the protected natural area, the answers were starkly divided by gender.
So the men and women had totally different reasons for staying away.
Completely different. For women, the primary barriers cited were lack of interest, fear of animals, and, most crucially, concerns over personal safety.
Let's spend a minute on that safety piece because it ties directly back to what we just discussed about the pétanque courts.
It's all connected.
A massive forest, by its very nature, is isolated from the eyes of the city. It can feel incredibly threatening if you do not feel socially protected by the culture around you.
Absolutely.
If a Maghrebi woman already experiences verbal harassment and microaggressions in a crowded, highly visible local plaza, imagine the calculus of walking into an isolated, rugged forest space.
A space predominantly used by white residents, where she might be entirely alone or only accompanied by small children.
The perceived risk of violence, or even just severe harassment with no witnesses, makes the forest essentially off-limits.
That calculus of risk is a defining feature of how marginalized women navigate the urban environment.
It's a constant background calculation.
And it is illuminating to contrast their responses with those of the men in the study.
Oh, right. What did the guys say?
When men were asked why they didn't visit the forest, safety was rarely mentioned. The primary barrier men cited was lack of time.
which speaks to a completely different type of systemic pressure.
Exactly.
Many of the men in these impoverished neighborhoods are dealing with severe time poverty. They are working precarious, labor-intensive jobs, often pulling long hours or working multiple gigs just to survive.
They simply don't have the luxury of leisure time to go on a 3-hour hike.
But the barriers keeping women out are fundamentally tied to physical vulnerability, feeling unwelcome, and the heavy burden of caregiving.
This specific disparity is a textbook example of intersectionality in action.
How so?
Well, the barriers these residents face cannot be understood by looking at race alone or gender alone.
Right, it's the combination.
It is the specific overlapping intersection of being a woman and being racialized as someone from the global south that creates this unique compounding barrier to accessing nature.
And there's another layer to this data that I thought was incredibly revealing about the nature of women's relationship to public space.
The data on who accompanies them.
Yes. The paper points out that age doesn't really dictate whether people know about the park, but it fundamentally alters who they go to the park with.
Break that down for us.
The researchers observed that women and middle-aged residents overwhelmingly visit these green spaces accompanied by children. Older residents tend to go with pets. Men, on the other hand, are significantly more likely to utilize the spaces alone.
That observation is critical for urban planners to internalize.
It really is.
It proves that for women, particularly in these demographics, the use of public space is intrinsically and undeniably tied to care work.
A woman's experience of a park is very rarely just about her own independent leisure or physical fitness.
No, it is about actively managing the leisure, the safety, and the biological needs of the dependents she is responsible for.
Yes. If you are a mother, taking your kids to the park isn't a break from work. The park is your workplace.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
It is the environment where you are performing the intense labor of parenting. So if that workplace doesn't have shade to keep the kids cool, or a bathroom for emergencies, or a safe line of sight to watch a toddler run, your workplace is structurally broken.
It is actively making your job harder.
Which brings us to the pivotal question of this entire deep dive. Recognizing these barriers, the lethal lack of shade, the insidious microsegregation, the profound safety concerns, and the heavy caregiving burdens, it's only the first step.
Diagnosing the illness is not the same as prescribing the cure.
Exactly. If we have the data proving that current urban design is actively failing women, failing caregivers, and failing racialized groups, how do we flip the script?
How do we actively design a space that does the exact opposite?
So what does this all mean? How do we take the rigorous academic data from this Barcelona study and translate it into actual physical blueprints?
How do we design for liberation instead of just decoration?
This brings us to the synthesis of today's conversation, the concept of the feminist mark. By reverse engineering the barriers identified in this study, we can extract 3 foundational design principles for building a truly equitable public space.
Let's lay out those principles clearly. Feminist park design principle number 1, infrastructure as care.
Now, this sounds very academic, but when you look at the survey results, it is the most basic, grounded demand imaginable.
What did the residents actually ask for?
When the researchers asked the residents of CM and TB what improvements they actually wanted to see in their parks, they didn't ask for abstract conceptual art installations or high-end landscaping. They asked for survival tools.
The quantitative data is unambiguous on this point.
Yeah, run the numbers for us.
56% of respondents simply wanted more shade. 35% wanted access to drinking water points. And 34% requested clean public restrooms.
It is entirely about acknowledging biological reality.
A traditional patriarchal approach to park design looks at a park as a visual landscape painting.
Like it's just meant to be looked at.
Exactly. It's meant to look pristine and orderly from a distance, favoring wide green lawns and geometric paths.
But a feminist approach to park design looks at a park as a living, breathing system that must support vulnerable human bodies.
Right. If you are 8 months pregnant, you need a bathroom.
If you have a 2-year-old running around in the summer, you need immediate access to hydration.
If you are 75 years old, you need shade so you don't literally suffer a heat stroke.
If we analyze city budgets through this feminist lens, we realize that providing basic biological necessities, hydration, sanitation, heat relief, is the absolute baseline for equitable access.
You cannot claim to have a just public space if the environment actively punishes the physical realities of the people trying to use it.
In this framework, Building a clean, accessible public bathroom is not just a tedious civic amenity or a maintenance headache.
No, in a feminist park, it is a profound structural act of public care.
A bathroom as an act of public care. That completely reorients how you look at what a city values. It means care work isn't just something individuals do, it's something the city's architecture should do.
Okay, let's move to feminist park design principle number 2, designing for the collective.
This principle stems directly from the differing usage patterns we dissected earlier, specifically how Global South residents utilize space.
The study found that these respondents, especially the women, heavily prioritized child-focused infrastructure.
They didn't just want wide, undefined open fields.
No, they specifically requested clearly defined areas exclusively for small children with shaded seating nearby for accompanying adults.
Because right now, the default standard for park design heavily favors the solitary individual.
Parks are built for the solo jogger with their headphones in.
Or the individual cyclist, or the person reading a book on a solitary bench. It is an architecture of isolation.
But the Global South women in CM and TB are using the park as a collective hub.
They're socializing, sharing resources, and co-parenting in these public squares.
The contrast in design philosophy is stark. Patriarchal design views parks primarily as spaces for individual recreation and physical optimization.
But feminist design demands that parks function as hubs of community care and collective socialization.
If an urban planner designs a beautiful new playground, but fails to build a shaded, comfortable area where 4 or 5 mothers can sit together, talk, and maintain a line of sight on their kids, that planner has failed.
Failed to design for the collective reality of how that space is actually utilized.
By failing to provide that collective seating, you are forcing those caregivers to stand in the blazing sun,
And that physical discomfort shortens the amount of time they can stay at the park.
which in turn degrades the time they have to bond with their neighbors.
Oh. Which ultimately weakens the social fabric of the entire community. It's a domino effect of bad design.
But by simply building shaded, clustered seating near the playground, the architecture itself is physically fostering community resilience.
That leads us perfectly into feminist park design principle number 3, linguistic and cultural belonging.
This is perhaps one of the most subtle yet structurally powerful recommendations derived from the paper.
What was the specific request?
The researchers noted a highly specific request from the Global South respondents regarding the intimidating cultural forest. They wanted multilingual signage, along with educational information detailing the local flora, fauna, and the specific history of the neighborhood.
Now, why does a sign matter so much? Because a sign is never just a piece of metal with words on it.
No, a sign is a signal of expectation.
It tells you exactly who the space expects to be there.
If you walk into a vast, socially intimidating forest, and every single informational sign, every trail marker, every rule board is written exclusively in a language you struggle with, the forest is literally broadcasting a message to you.
It is saying you are not the target audience for this space.
Precisely. To dismantle the kind of micro-segregation we saw at the pétanque courts, a feminist park must explicitly and actively welcome diverse cultures.
It cannot rely on passive neutrality.
Because as we've established, neutrality defaults to the dominant culture.
Through the implementation of multilingual signage and culturally relevant educational programming, the park actively proves that the space belongs to the migrant and racialized communities just as much as it belongs to anyone else.
It removes the ambiguity that allows racist gatekeepers to say, "You don't belong here."
It functions as an anti-racist intervention built right into the wayfinding infrastructure of the park.
Exactly.
If an educational plaque explains the ecological history of the forest in Arabic, Urdu, Spanish, and Catalan, it instantly validates the presence of every single person reading it.
It is the city's way of structurally saying, "We knew you were coming, and we built this space for you."
This synthesis of data and design raises an urgent question.
This raises an important question, one that truly sits at the heart of the research.
Go ahead.
As major cities scramble to build green infrastructure to survive the escalating climate crisis, we have to ask ourselves a hard question.
Okay, what is it?
Can we truly consider a city resilient if its natural climate shelters, its forests and parks, are perceived as unsafe, culturally unwelcoming, or physically inaccessible by its most vulnerable residents?
If a city builds a beautiful shaded heat shelter, but women of color are terrified to walk into it because of harassment, then it isn't a heat shelter at all.
It's just a bunch of trees they aren't allowed to use.
And that is the crux of the issue. Ecological resilience that lacks a foundation of social equity is nothing more than green gentrification masquerading as progress.
It's been a massive paradigm-shifting journey today.
It really has. We started by looking at two specific isolated neighborhoods in Barcelona, Ciutat Meridiana and Torre Baró.
And through the rigorous data collected by the researchers, we unpacked how something as seemingly simple and universal as taking a walk in the woods is, in reality, heavily dictated by the intersecting realities of your race, your gender, your age, and your class.
We looked at the nature gap and how the economic forces of green gentrification weaponize nature to push marginalized people out of their own communities.
We explored the stark realities hidden within the survey data, how women from the global south are forced to utilize harsh, urban concrete plazas out of absolute necessity due to congested housing conditions,
while simultaneously avoiding the lush, protected forests next door due to profound fears for their personal safety and a lack of inclusive design.
We examined how casual, everyday microaggressions successfully enforce invisible boundaries in public squares, essentially privatizing public land for the dominant culture.
And most importantly, we didn't just admire the problem. We used that data to sketch out a tangible blueprint for the feminist park.
A park that prioritizes infrastructure as an act of public care, providing shade, water, and bathrooms as biological rights.
A park that deliberately designs for the collective, supporting the realities of caregivers and community gathering, rather than solely catering to the solo athlete.
And a park that explicitly fosters linguistic and cultural belonging through its wayfinding to actively combat racism.
The feminist park isn't just a theoretical, academic concept confined to a journal article.
As this deep dive has demonstrated, it is a desperately needed, highly practical blueprint for solving the lived realities faced by the residents of Ciutat Meridiana, Torre Baró, and vulnerable racialized populations in cities globally.
If we are going to survive the climate crisis together, our public spaces must be designed from the ground up to protect, support, and liberate everyone, not just the privileged few.
I couldn't agree more.
So I want you to take all of this with you. Think back one more time to that favorite local park you visualized at the very beginning of our conversation.
Picture it clearly.
Next time you walk through it, I challenge you. Don't just admire the landscaping, and don't just look at who is there enjoying the sun.
Look closer.
Look closely at the benches. Are they grouped together for community or isolated? Look at where the shade falls. Does it cover the playground or just the walking paths?
Look at the language on the signs.
And ask yourself, who was this space actually built for? And more importantly, who is missing?
This knowledge is a tool, really. A tool for seeing your city differently, and potentially for helping to change it.
It's been a really insightful deep dive, I think. This document provides such a vital framework, especially for projects like the Feminist Park Project that are trying to build something fundamentally different. It shows just how interlinked urban design and social justice are.
It really does. But it also shows the scale of the challenge, right? It requires sustained effort, real commitment, and a genuine willingness to shift power dynamics in how cities get made and managed.
Definitely. It makes you think about how we ensure those voices, the ones that have been excluded, are actually heard and centered.
There's another quote from Sarah Ahmed that feels relevant here.
Go on.
She says, "If you have to shout to be heard, you are heard as shouting."
That's powerful.
It makes you ponder, doesn't it? How can the design of public space itself work differently? How can it amplify the voices of those who've been historically silenced, ensuring their needs are met without them having to shout just to be noticed?
How can design itself listen? That's a really provocative thought to end on.
A lot to think about.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.